Hello, folks. This is Dr. DeValley, and this lecture is about researching culture or anthropological fieldwork. Again, it has a lot of slides, about 50, so I'm not going to be able to talk through all of them, but I will, because of my time limit of 15 minutes, but I will leave time at the end so you can pace through each slide at your speed. And also, when it's playing as a video, you can just hit the vertical equal sign and that'll stop the video while you read the sign, and then you can hit the arrow side to start the video again and continue through the slides that way. Now, the big questions in anthropological fieldwork is, how do cultural anthropologists conduct research about culture? And what does fieldwork involve? And what are some of the urgent issues in cultural anthropology research today? We will try to address all of these. Now, there's changing research methods in anthropology, moving from the armchair speculating about a people based on, for example, missionaries or soldiers' reports, to participant observation, to living with and among the people you are studying. This is a photograph of Daniel, who is a medical resident in a psychiatric hospital in Moldova, where I was doing research. He is interviewing a patient about her childhood experiences as part of a research project we worked on in 2005. Now, the history of anthropological fieldwork was, in the 1870s, was the armchair approach, where anthropologists would get the reports of missionaries or colonial officials or soldiers and then try to understand the cultures from them. In the early 1900s began the veranda approach, where the anthropologists actually went to the societies where the people lived, but he usually lived in a house on the edge of the village or compound, and people would come to see him or her, and he would sit at a desk and interview the person. It was obviously not a living situation. And then finally, today, which really began in the early 1920s, is the participant observation technique, where the anthropologist goes to the culture he or she wants to study, lives with those people for over a year, learns their native language, and really gets an understanding of what the culture is about. And this technique is called participant observation. Bronislaw Malinowski was one of the first anthropologists who took this approach while studying the people of the Trobriand Islands. And the key elements are living with the people, participating in their everyday life, and learning the language. Here's a photo. On the left is Vladimir, who's a psychiatrist with both an MD and a Ph.D. in Moldova. And on the right is my lovely wife, Vicky. We were celebrating the completion of our field work for the summer of 2005, and we all went out to a nice restaurant for dinner. Now, early field work and participant observation, the goal was to record as much as possible of a people's language, song, rituals, and social life, because many cultures were disappearing as a result of colonialization and the influence of the developed world on the tribal societies in the underdeveloped world. And most research was conducted in small, isolated cultures, what we would call tribes or hunting-gathering bands. An example would be the atolls off the island of New Guinea. They were colonized by Great Britain, ceded to Australia, and Christian missionaries introduced cricket as a substitute for warfare, and many different aspects of culture change occurred. So anthropologists were quickly trying to record the traditional cultures before they disappeared. And here is a map of the Trobriand Islands, and you can see where they're located in the small global map off the coast of New Guinea and northeastern Australia. Now, as a result of the global world, there's changing methods in research. Few, if any, isolated cultures remain. So anthropologists needed methods for studying larger scale societies like our own, the global local connections between small and distant societies, as well as culture change. So we went from the faraway, exotic, and small scale, for example, the Andaman Islands of India or the Samoan Islands, to urbanizing, globalizing sites such as Tangiers in modern Morocco, or to the field at home in America, for example, in Tangier, Virginia. I bet you didn't even know there was a place such as that. Including Main Street of American and industrial societies. And also there was a movement from the holistic study of small groups. In other words, such as indigenous people as the Andaman Islands, where you tried to study all aspects of a culture to a focused topical area such as health or conflict in larger societies. As the societies get bigger, there is a need to focus on a smaller aspect of it. And for example, to the study of how globalization affects local markets in the old city of Istanbul in Turkey. In other words, a more focused approach. And specialized topics such as women's lives in a South Indian urban neighborhood, as is pictured here, or to public health communications in Johannesburg, South Africa. Here, these two signs by a football stadium are saying how people should use condoms, and also how AIDS is not something to be ashamed of, but it's a disease that needs to be dealt with. And finally, there is the whole new field of the anthropology of tourism, studying the social and environmental effects of tourism, for example, here in the Andaman Islands. Now, there's also multi-sited research, which is a newer innovation. Fieldwork conducted on a topic in more than one location. For example, John Whiting and his wife in the 1950s and 60s focused on 6 different cultures in Africa, and they had people in each one study the same thing, mainly geared around child rearing techniques, or here more recently about the language and cultures of hairstyles among African American women. Anthropology also works as applied anthropology, and here's an example for product development. Anthropologists did focused research in homes of employed Californians. They noticed that breakfast was a rushed affair. People were rushing to get out of the house, and they weren't eating well. But parents wanted the kids to have a good meal. So the result was anthropologists developed the concept of Go-Gurt, which was a kind of like a yogurt, a healthy yogurt with vitamins that one could eat quickly on the run. So now, doing field work in cultural anthropology, the beginning of the fieldwork process is working in the field, learning techniques, and recording the culture that you are studying. First, the anthropologists must choose a research topic, find gaps in the literature that are not covered, look at current events that are happening around the world, focusing particularly, say, on a commodity, for example, coffee production, or restudying earlier studies of different societies. And sometimes just good luck works into the picture. To prepare for the field, the anthropologist needs to seek funding, grants, has to get permission to conduct the research. There are ethical considerations. There's also specialized equipment that's needed, maybe a medical kit. There's language training, and also there's some personal safety considerations depending on where in the world the person is going to. Field work is a lengthy and difficult process. There's the site selection, gaining rapport with the people that you want to study. There's usually some minor exchange of gifts. Microcultures and fieldwork are issues of race, gender, class, age, and also culture shock. The anthropologist can experience culture shock by leaving a culture he or she is familiar with and going into an alien place and just feeling totally at a loss. The initial part, which often maybe takes a couple of months, is to develop rapport. Rapport is a trusting relationship between the researcher and the study population. It's also very important to establish rapport with gatekeepers in the culture. In other words, key people who have influence over other members of the culture. Sometimes anthropologists are often labeled as spies. And an example, Krista Salamandra was called a spy for her research in Damascus, Syria, which wasn't at all true. And here is a map of Syria, which you're familiar with today because of the current war. Now, gift giving and exchange. Giving gifts can help the project proceed, but they should be culturally and ethically appropriate. In other words, you don't want to give a tribal society guns. And it's important to learn the local rules of exchange so that you are giving something that is valuable but not too valuable as to embarrass your guest, etc. There are examples of culture and gift giving is what is appropriate for a gift, how do you do it, how do you give it, and how do you behave as a gift giver, and how to behave if someone gives you a gift, if and how a gift is a follow-up gift. Because in many cultures, the economic system is actually, distribution is done through giving of gifts. It is not through buying and selling or trading. It is, I give you a gift today, and then tomorrow you give me a gift. That's how exchange works. In terms of microcultures, class, race, gender, age, they may affect how local people will perceive and welcome an anthropologist. For example, a female anthropologist in an Arab society is going to have a much more difficult time than a male anthropologist would. The same way, if a male anthropologist wanted to study child rearing, he would have a much harder time than a female anthropologist would. There is also the phenomenon of culture shock, which is the feelings of uneasiness, loneliness, anxiety that can occur when a person shifts from one culture to another one, even when the person is trained. And there's also a reduced competence as a cultural actor. In other words, you do not know the rules of the new culture, so you do not feel competent. That happened to me years ago when I was doing field work in Morocco in North Africa. It felt like a total alien place. I really did not know how to interact with the people. I couldn't read street signs. Before that, I had done field work in the Canary Islands, which was a Spanish-speaking culture, and at least I could relate. But with the Arabic culture, I was totally at a loss. In fact, I got myself very sick for a while. So culture shock is real. And it can include problems with food, language, barriers, and loneliness. I had really sort of gastric indigestion, and I have to admit I had the runs for about 3 weeks in Morocco. And the reverse of culture shock may also occur after coming home. In other words, the person who back from a war.